All right, and we're live. And this time, keeping my eye on the camera, because that's what you said I should do last time, huh, Farhan? I keep looking to my left because that's where you are, but I need to ignore you. You are not important.
Yes, don't look at me. Look right here at the camera.
Right.
And try not to turn around.
Try not to turn around like this. But what if I want to show them the positions from my rear?
You turn to your right because we have alternate angle.
Right. But then I have to look to the camera.
You don't have to. I
shall do the cuts like this. I keep my eye on the.
Oh, this light.
That's not gonna be weird.
Too much glare on my face. Oh, there we go.
Yes, and we do not want to see so much of your face.
No, that means you can't see my face at all.
That's probably better.
Oh, all right. Okay, let's get the stream started.
All right. So yeah.
Or you want to wait? Only Faris and Sarah.
Only Faris is here. Well, Faris and Sarah. Hi, Sarah. Is that your Sarah?
Yep.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
She said she'd be upstairs here in the same room, but she's just, not.
All right. Well.
Okay. You can start whenever you start. People will drop in and out.
I guess so. I mean, that's how streaming works, right?
Yep.
You do all this effort for this one guy. Thank you so much, Faris, for being here on time and everything. Thank you. Please like and subscribe. Today we're going to be doing some more. We're going to look in depth in the basic attacks. We're going to be discussing some guards, and time permitting, I want to look at what we did last week with the Zornhau and see if we can do some follow-ups, some different follow-ups from that. All the same, yeah, hi and welcome. So last week we looked at the basic guards, basic attacks. There were 8 of them, and I think it would be prudent if we demonstrate them just one more time. Don't you think, Farhan?
Yeah, let's go into maybe a bit more detail. We'll talk about how to perform them. What makes a good basic strike?
What makes a good basic strike? Yeah, there's a lot of different things that makes a good basic strike. 8 or 9 actually. So we're going to go into them in detail. But first, I would just want to demonstrate them one more time so that we can, so that we all know what we're talking about, right? So the 8 basic strikes. If you want to do this at home, little disclaimer: if you want to do this at home, find a space where you can swing a stick around. Remember last week we said that a broomstick was probably good enough. Farhan recommended a hammer.
If you got two-handed grip on a hammer, it's great.
Yeah.
Or a baby sword.
Or a baby sword, exactly. As long as you have something that you can have the feel of holding it with 2 hands without having too much, while having some weight on it. I wouldn't worry too much about the balance and about the different metrics of what makes a sword. Doesn't really matter. That's not why we're practicing this. Anyway, so basic attacks I'll be doing with my sword, and what we do is we start in with our left foot forward, and we're holding our sword just underneath the cross guard with my left hand all the way down at the pommel. And we bring our sword up to our shoulder where it's pointed up. This is called from Tag, and we're going to look into that in a bit. And the first cut was just a diagonal cut downwards. And those who paid attention last week will notice that it was always important that you keep the tip of your sword aimed at your enemy to be protecting threat. So, step back, left foot forward, right foot back. You hold your sword at the shoulder, and then you cut, ending with the tip at your enemy. And at the end of the cut, you pull your sword back close to your body so that nobody can attack your arms while they're outstretched. One time, cut, diagonal down, and then back to your. We're going to go back, going to do that, going to do the same, but over left. There. And when I do the cut over left, I have my right foot forward, and then I cut diagonal down here. And just like with the first cut, at the end of the cut, you'll pull your sword back towards your hips. So you get a sort of extend, retract movement. Cut one, you extend, you cut as far as you can without overstretching, overreaching, and then you pull it back. And cut two, comes from the shoulder, and again, you cut as far as you can, and then you pull it back. So you get a sort of out, in kind of movement. If I show that from the side, you'll get a different view. Out, in, and out, in. And you can really see that once you do that a little bit more fluidly, you get a nice arc. Out, in, out, in. Right? After every cut, I keep my sword nice and close to me to prevent people from attacking my hands. So last time we looked at cut 3 and 4. 3 and 4 were upwards cuts that were aimed at the head, and much of it is the same as 1 and 2. They are diagonal cuts. Instead of going down, they go up. And like the cuts 1 and 2, I need to stretch my hands out, making the attack, and then pull them in next to my head, keeping my sword tip aimed at my opponent. So I start from my leg, where my sword is pointing backwards. This guard is called Nebenhoed, and you cut, extend your arms, and then pull back. And go back to Nebenhoed on the other side. This is always the most confusing cut for everybody, because here, as you notice, my hands are crossed. And people find it always super confusing. They always start to do like, no, my hands are not supposed to be crossed, but yes, they are. So my left hand goes underneath my right hand. Right, so cut 4 goes from my left side, and again, step forward. Cut far, and then pull back. So from the right side, cut up, cut far, pull back. And from the left side, cut up, cut far, and pull back. I'll show it from the side. So from here, cut up, and pull back. And cut up, and then pull back. Let me show that a little bit. Right here, cut up, and then pull back. And here my hands, after cut 4, my hands are still crossed. Right? That final guard, by the way, this one, is called ox. You spell that O-C-H-S. And you have the ox on the other side as well. That's this ox over here. So if we combine those 4 together, what you get is cut 1, far back, cut 2, far back, cut 3, far back, cut 4, far back.
Yeah, Faris, it's been a long day.
It has been a long day, but that's no excuse for not to be training or exercising.
No, Faris is saying you sound tired.
I sound tired.
Yeah, man.
I guess that's an option, a possibility, that it may have been a long day, but that's okay, because, I'm doing sword fighting now.
Yeah.
Fatigue doesn't matter.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us right now. We're doing the basic strikes. Sasha has just gone over the first 2. I think we're coming into cuts 3. 5 and 6 now?
4. Yeah, 5 and 6. 5 and 6 indeed. Oh, sorry. So 5. It's a horizontal cut. So after cut 4, we were in the ox where our arms on the right side. My sword is pointing forward. I have the sword next to my head. And I'm going to make a horizontal cut aimed at someone's neck. And again, I extend forward and then pull back. And then cut 6 is again, I cut far forward and then pull back. If I observe from the side, I start here, cut forward, pull back, and forward, and pull back. All right. So we're here, forward, back, forward, back. All right, and every time it's like super important that every time you pull back, after every cut. Caveat, this is with single cuts. Once you start following cuts onto one another, this becomes a little less important. But generally, you'll want to keep your hand safe. In every tournament, under every rule set I've seen in HEMA, as well as in every sparring match and fight I've been in, the hands are always super vulnerable. You get hit the most on the hands. So you'll want to keep them safe. If only, even when you're training, if you don't keep your hands safe, you're going to get bruised. So we were at 6. So yeah, we did cut 1, far, pull back, cut 2, far, pull back, 3, up, pull back, 4, up, pull back, 5, far, and pull back, and 6, reach far, and pull back. And then 7 and 8 are from, I have to bring my sword down to my hip again, and 7 and 8 are the thrusts, where I want to thrust forward, 1, and then thrust 8 over the other side, 2. And yeah, let's look at each of the cuts individually. First, let's go over some general rules when doing the basic cuts, and then let's go over each of the cuts individually to see if we can really hammer out the details of what's going on. Right, Fran?
Yeah, I mean, I really have nothing to add to that.
I really have nothing to add to that. It's been a long day for you too. Our witty banter is failing.
I've been cleaning out the storeroom, man.
Oh dear. If it's as bad as the storeroom in my house, I feel for you.
Yeah. Actually, I do have one other thing to add now that you bring it up, in that the numbering of these cuts is not from German sword fighting. It's not in the Zettel. We should probably mention that they have proper names. The numbering we give them is a modern HEMA thing that people have adopted from other sword styles.
Sure. The whole idea of katas and stuff like that.
Yeah.
We've had to borrow from other styles, because when people started doing HEMA, we had no masters to teach us. We had no way. We had to figure out everything for ourselves. So we started looking at other martial arts and other sword-based martial arts, and those happen to be Asian martial arts. And they work a lot from katas, from, okay, this position to that position to that position.
Although, to be fair, the numbering that we currently use was originally found also in HEMA from military saber.
Wow.
So it's technically still HEMA, but not really.
Well, military saber is HEMA.
Yeah.
All right. All the same.
Yeah.
When you're doing the basic cuts, a few things are super important. I've gone over this already, but let's start with stance. All right. So the stance is the way you position your body before and after the cut. Right. So I've already mentioned that you start with your left leg forward and you start with your right leg back. But I'd like to be a little bit more specific in how, and I'd like to give a little bit of a disclaimer. This is how I teach it. All right. The documents that I most read, Ringeck's treatise, doesn't really go all that deep into stance and into, but that's mainly because the treatise already assumes that, oh, you already know sword fighting, now let me teach you my style. So, and there's a lot of conflicting pictures. You see that Meyer has a different idea on how the stances work than, say, Thalhofer and Dobringer and all the other masters. So this is how I teach it, and feel free to say, no, that's not how it's supposed to be done.
Thalhofer doesn't even bother about stance. He just says, attack them.
Yeah, exactly. So what we found to be very effective is with your stance that you have to have a wide stance. And you have to be a little low in your knees, right? We don't stand all the way straight with my feet relatively close together. the first thing that you got to do is you got to bend through your knees a little. Under no circumstance should your knee be locked. So what we mean by locked means that it's fully stretched out, right? Fully straight. You want to lean a little into your knees like that. And you get that when you do that. I always show that you get a little bit of a bounce in your movement, and you can step from your front foot, lean in your front foot, lean into your right foot, and it should be easy. If you're all the way stretched, if your legs are locked, then you can't really do that. Can't lean forward, can't really lean backwards. And that's super important. If you want to stay mobile, if you want to stay light on your feet, then that's what you got to do. You got to stay, lean into your knees a little bit, and have your feet relatively far apart.
Faris is asking, how high should your stance be? Like, how far do you want to sink into this?
Okay, well,
and I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's an incredibly loaded question. Generally, what I advise is a little bit, but that your knee doesn't extend past your toe. So it doesn't extend past your foot. So how I always say is, like, for my left leg, if my left leg is forward, I look down at my toe, and if I can still see it, then I'm good. But once my knee passes the toe, then I can't do that anymore. So once I can't see my front foot anymore, that's when I've gone too far down. However, if you look at some of the other manuscripts, you really see that they are like they are fighting from a super low posture. That's Meyer, I think.
Meyer's a bit more middle loaded, so he doesn't lean forward so much.
Right. Which picture is that they lean so super forward? Is that Liberi?
Meyer leans super forward for rapier.
No, right. All the same.
But rapier is another story.
So what I mean to say is that there is some precedent for some very low stances, but personally, I found that I want to be able to see the tips of my toes at all times. That's how low I dare to go. And to be fair, while yes, the lower you go, the lower the center of gravity of your body is, giving you a bigger edge in grappling. But it's not like you need to have one stance throughout the whole fight. Like, once your opponent comes closer, you can just sink down into your knees to get that little bit of edge in grappling. Not so much. I always, comfortably low. Sword fighting, if anything, should be from one comfortable position to the next. So yeah, through your knees. And last week I've already said, and it bears repeating this week, is that if you observe the line that I have on my floor, the one that I made out of tape, that one foot is on the left side of the line, and one foot is on the right side of the line, and that's where they will stay. Whenever I do the basic cuts, you can look back in the history of the stream, but whenever I make the cuts, my left foot and my right foot stay on their own side of the line. Never should they cross. Too often do I see starting sword fighters that they end up being more or less on the line. So they one and then two, and you'll notice that they turn their shoulders and their back with every cut. Now my back is pointing to the right, and now my back is pointing to the left. So it's far too much motion. You want to stay facing at your opponent at all times, so your shoulders should move minimally. Yeah, so that's about stance. That's the first thing you got to keep in mind when you're doing the basic strikes, is your stance. Always got to keep your feet on both sides of the line. Yeah, and honestly, when you are practicing this at home, you'll want to have a line, especially when you're beginning. Whenever we're in a gym hall or something like that, badminton court, whenever we're anywhere, I always tell newbies, find a line. Left foot on the left side, right foot on the right side, and never should they cross the line or touch the line. Once you get a little bit more advanced stuff, then they're saying that there were exceptions to this rule. But in general, this will serve you well. Stance. Yes. The second one is the guards. All right. So with stance, we've looked at what the feet are doing. With guards, we're looking at what the hands are doing, what the hands and the arms are doing. So this guard that we have here, that we start cut 1 from and cut 2 from, where my sword is pointing straight up. I'm having my sword at the shoulder. This is called vom Tag. Vom Tag is German for, from the roof. And that's because cuts from vom Tag come, from above, as if they were coming from the roof. From vom Tag. There's basically 3 types of vom Tag. I have one on the left, I have one on the right, and I have one above my head here. And for the one above my head, I see that all the newbies, they always point their vom Tags way far down like this. But with Ringeck, I found that mostly you want to have it, I need to go down a little bit, mostly you want to have it 45 degrees up, nothing more. And I'm looking underneath my arms. I'm looking underneath my arms. All right, so 3 kinds of vom Tags. And if you're wondering, yes, I can do the first cuts from the vom Tag above my head, where I can cut down, go back to the vom Tag above the head, and cut down, like that. So from the vom Tag, the first 2 cuts come from the vom Tag, where my cuts are from that. And interestingly, I cut to another guard. When I end my cut, I am here, and I'll try to pull it back. And this is the second guard. This is called fluke, or the plow. And it's the idea that I'm pushing towards the ground, if you will, plowing the ground. So in this guard, my sword is aimed at my opponent, as in most guards. And yeah, so I have 2 flukes, one on my left and one on my right. Right, so left fluke, right fluke. And if you've paid attention when I said, like, hey, for the thrusts, for thrust 7 and 8, you have to lower your sword to your hips. So yeah, the thrusts come from the fluke. So from the fluke, I thrust forward and then pull back into fluke, and thrust forward and pull back into fluke. Now fluke, I'm holding my hands comfortably against my body. Fluke should not be floating in front of you or to your side, or especially not in the middle. Fluke should be comfortably on my right side or on my left side. Anything to add so far?
Not yet, but I will add something when we reach ox.
All right, fine. Let's go to ox then. So, cuts 3 and 4, like I said, they start in Nebenhut. And Nebenhut is here. And Hut means guard in German. And Neben means next to. So this is literally the next to you guard. So where you hold your sword next to you. My tip is pointing backwards, by the way. It's pointing not like this backwards, but I'm leaning it on my leg, and it's pointing backwards. If I do the Nebenhut on the other side, you'll notice that I have to cross my arms. So right side Nebenhut is comfortable, and then left side Nebenhut is where my arms are crossed. Like this. I'm doing it wrong. Here. And then those guards, then cuts 3 and 4, they end in this guard next to your head. And that we call the ox. And yeah. Again, sword tip at my opponent. Too often in combat do I see that people have the ox like unreasonably far forward. But like I said, this only makes your hands a target. You'll want to keep the ox next to you. I always like to say you need to be listening to your wrist as if you were wearing a watch. So now I'm listening to my left wrist, left side ox, I'm listening to my left wrist. And right side ox, where I have my hands crossed again, by the way, I'm listening to my right wrist, as if I were wearing a watch on my right hand. I'm listening and say, hey, is it still working? So yeah. And what did you want to add, Farn?
No, it's just basically these 2 guards, the fluke and the ox.
Fluke and ox?
Yes. If you end up reading the manuals, you'll sometimes see them referred to as the hanging guards instead. Uh, they are practically the same thing. It's just that in the Lichtenauer tradition, the manuscripts use hanging, upper hanging and lower hanging guards, ox and fluke in the same way. It's practically the same guard.
Yes. Don't forget
That
that
just
we
goes.
also have the Zweihanger, the two hangings in the Lichtenauer tradition, which go from these two guards.
Yes. But basically, if just letting people know, if you're reading the manuscripts, you're seeing these things, you're wondering how are they different from one another. They are not.
Fair point. All right, so let's revise for now. We had this guard, which was called the, and I then realized that I can't hear the people watching the stream,
Exactly.
Vontag. And this guard, think about it for a moment. What was this guard called? If you said fluke, then you're correct. And we had this guard.
Nobody said anything in chat, so they've forgotten already.
They've forgotten already. Shame on you. All right, so this guard is the Nebenhood. And then we had this guard, the high guard, which is called Ox. There's one more basic guard, which we haven't really seen so far yet. That's this guard, where my sword is pointing down but straight forward. The Lichtenauer tradition considers this one of the basic guards as well, even though none of the cuts end or start, none of the basic cuts end or start from this guard. All the same, this guard is called Alber. And with Alber, my sword is straightforward. And it's really only one Alber because even if I am having my right foot forward, then I'm still having Alber. So left foot forward, Alber. Right foot forward, Alber. And you'll see that this one is straight over the line, straightforward. This Nebenhood is pointing backwards. Nebenhood, point backwards, backwards. Alber is pointing forwards. And we have this guard, the fluke, this guard, the ox, this guard from Tuck. So yeah.
Uh, Fares is asking the difference between ox and key guard, which is Schlüssel.
Schlüssel.
So
Remind me,
basically,
Schlüssel.
I can answer this once.
All right.
Basically,
Do I need to magnify your screen?
don't think so. Yeah, you
Don't
can.
think so. I can. Yeah. Okay.
You can.
You can.
I will.
I want to show off like everything that I set up for the stream.
Okay. Anyway, so you're familiar with the ox from this side, which is high, protecting your head. This is ox. Schlüssel is a bit lower. Oh, sorry, you are right-handed people. Resting on your arm.
Right.
So it's a lot lower. It doesn't quite protect your head as much. But the key difference, see what I said there? The key difference.
Because Schlüssel means key. Yes.
The key difference is that the key guard, Schlüssel, does not appear in traditional KDF, Kunstdefektens, the Lichtenauer tradition. It's a later addition in the Meyer treatises because this is something that's become as an extension of the original Lichtenauer techniques. It's kind of an intermediate, sitting somewhere between ox and fluke, because you can see it's not quite high enough to be ox, it's not quite low enough to be fluke, and that's what it is. It's basically kind of similar, and it's used as a different position and in a later treatise that doesn't quite involve what we're covering right now.
Interesting that you see the development and the specifying of guards, especially towards later treatises, as they are building on the earlier treatises. The Lichtenauer tradition that we practice is basically very early on when they just start codifying sword fighting and style of the Lichtenauer tradition. And they're like, okay, so we have these 7 guards that we sort of consider. You have the ox, and you have the fluke, and you have the alber, and you have the Wontag, and the Nebenhood, and there's 2 more. You have the Schrankhood, which is forward to the left or to the right, and then Langenort, which is straight forward as far as you can reach. But you see later guards in later manuscripts who are saying like, yeah, okay, so you have the ox or you have the fluke, but ideally this technique works a little bit better if you were to like lower your ox a little. So they call that a new guard. But you especially see this in the Italian traditions where you suddenly get like 16 different guards of everything in between, and can just be sorted into these basic guards from Lichtenauer, plus some.
You might want to switch back to your camera.
Yes. As fun as it is to watching Han, I'm gonna switch back.
I would also like to point out that the development between the original KDF and Meyer's stuff is roughly 150 years. So there are going to be a lot of differences.
All right. So yeah, we had the basic attacks, and we were talking about the guards, 4 guards, and with the basic attacks. So once you got your stance right, you have to get your guards right. All right. So you want to you want to fight from a guard to a guard. You don't want to start somewhere in the middle of a guard, like holding your sword forward. This is not really any kind of guard. I want to cut here, and I don't really end up in a fluke. That makes your cuts really ineffective, and it leaves you vulnerable to a lot of different attacks. Right? Someone who can look for it, they see that, oh, my ox is here, but he's holding his ox way back, right? Okay, because my vom Tag is way back, my elbow becomes vulnerable to attack. And if I'm cutting here and I'm not cutting to fluke, but I'm cutting to something like lower than a fluke because I've put too much strength in my cut and I can't control it, and here you'll notice that my sword isn't pointing at you anymore. So that means that you can freely attack me and I have no way of threatening you. So you want to keep your point at your opponent to threaten. And that's what fluke does. Fluke is like, okay, from your hip, you threaten your opponent. And that's what ox does. Ox is from your hip, from my opponent. So if I do the cut 5 and cut 6, right, I don't want to cut and overextend my swing, because now I'm not in an ox. I'm not threatening my opponent. My sword is pointed way back. Any sword fighter who sees this happening, can abuse this fact. So these guards basically come from, okay, vom Tag is a great position because you can strike from power with it. You can really put your body weight into a cut. And after that, you want to end up with your tip facing forward. But when you do that, you get in a sort of extended ox. So then they start pulling their sword back because else their hands would be getting attacked. So you get into a fluke. It's a very natural position to end up in. So then from Tag from the other side and then to fluke. And then the upwards cut, again, the Nebenhut is actually the weakest of the guards because here I'm not directly threatening my opponent. But at the same time, this is from here I can place the most powerful Unterhau, the cut from below. And I end up in ox, which is again the natural ending point where I'm pointing my sword at my opponent. I'm creating threat, so that's where my ox ends. So Nebenhut to ox. By the way, this is also why Ringeck considers the Nebenhut a secondary guard, not a primary guard. But Auber he considers a primary guard. So then from ox, when I cut sideways, cut 5, the Mittelhau, you'll notice if I want to end with my tip on my opponent, I end up in another ox. So cut, end up in another ox. And then from the thrust comes from the fluke. Because from there, I can thrust accurately and precisely because my tip is already on my opponent. So you see that each of these guards, they serve a function. It's more than just a pretty position to hold your sword in. When you cut from these positions, you make a powerful cut. And when you end in these positions, you'll end in a position where you're safer-ish, safer than other guards. So, yeah, each of these guards is useful. So when you do the 8 basic strikes, you gotta remember, from a guard to a guard. From Tag to Flug. Vom Tag to Flug. Nebenhoed to ox. Nebenhoed to ox. Ox to the other side ox. Ox to the other side ox. And Flug, thrust forward. And incidentally, if you're wondering, yeah, what's the final position called in the thrust? Well, that's Langenart. So these are the basic guards that you need to keep in mind. So, two things that we've already discussed. Stance, wide stance, low stance. Right, not on the same line, one left, one right, and then from guard to guard to keep yourself safe. Then you'll want to keep in mind distance, right? The many sword fighting manuals make a reference to the word measure, to find your measure and to fight from measure. And that measure is basically the distance between me and my opponent, as well as the position I'm fighting from. Once I'm in my measure, I have assumed a guard from which I want to attack, and I have determined that the distance from me to my opponent is far enough, or close enough, if you will. Of course, when you are practicing yourself, that is kind of hard. But one thing you got to keep in mind is that you don't want to cut short, right? Too often do I see cuts like this happening where they are fighting and then they're like, oh, that lagged. I'll show it again. Where they just keep their hands really close to them to immediately go into the safe hands position. But you'll want to cut far and then cut close. And then you'll notice that the distance that you can cover is kind of far. You can probably hit my laptop from here. I'm not going to do that. Mind you, I need to keep my laptop safe. But yeah, from here, you can cut really far. From here, you can cut really far. And only after the cut, I withdraw my hands. Likewise, your step, it goes along with distance, so that's number 4, stepping, right? Basically, every cut comes with a step, right? So I want to cut far and step forward. But this step forward, conversely, going against what I just said, can't be too far. Right? I don't want to step too far. I want to make a comfortable step, extend my hands. I want to make a comfortable step. I don't want to gain distance by overstepping. I can, but as you notice, I should do this from the side view, and you can really see.
Oh, you've got a side camera, it's fine.
It's fine. So here, you'll notice I'm really leaning into my front leg. And
I think the best way to describe it is to take a step, don't lunge.
Yeah, basically that. But I'm trying to demonstrate, yeah, take a step, don't lunge. Because when you lunge, all your weight is in your front foot. Your balance is too far forward. A canny opponent could seize this and grab your hands and then pull you forward, and you'd have no weight to counteract that. So you want to take a step, not too far. And this is also why so many starting students get into a linear position. They forget their stance and they forget their step. Because when you take a long step, you're going to get a more linear footwork. So I've been long stepping forward and backwards, and you'll notice that, hey, I'm pretty much on the line. So in order to maintain a wide stance, I can't take too big of a step. I can only take as far as my legs can reach, no further. And that's another reason why the line is so important. So we've had stepping, stance, guard to guard, and distance. Ron, help me out. What's next? There's 8 of these.
You've got ansetzen.
Ansetzen, yeah, we've discussed that one, always. Ansetzen, or setting on, means that after every cut, I set my tip on my opponent. Set my tip on my opponent so that my opponent will always be threatened by my sword, either because my sword is in a cut or because my tip is facing at my opponent. And my opponent can't just run at me and do stuff that I don't want him to do. And that's why I said, if you don't fight from guard to guard, if you're not practicing your ansetzen and my sword is to the side, then you can guess that people just really can just rush in, grab me, throw me to the ground. Easy as that. So you'll want to do ansetzen. Tip on your opponent. Ansetzen. 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 Left, right. Ansetzen. Thrust. Ansetzen. Thrust. Yeah. Super important. Like, I always look for that.
Super important?
What else is super important?
That one of these that we always forget?
The one that we always forget?
Breathing.
Breathing, yes. Very important. And I just remembered another one. Okay, so breathing. Very important, right? Our body runs on oxygen. And without it, our performance decreases, like, dramatically. Even if you don't die of suffocation, your muscles will create lactic acids and you'll lose all power and endurance. So generally what we believe is, like, you got to breathe out with every cut. There's some big hoo-ha with this about, in Asian martial arts. I mean, not to diss on Asian martial arts, but like when you get stuff like the ki shout and stuff like that, with every punch they go like, and they say like, oh, that's how you channel your inner ki, and that's how you create strength. And no, you're breathing. You're bringing oxygen, because when I force air out, I must also force air in. So when you cut, you breathe out. Every cut, you breathe out. Every step, you breathe out. Don't be too worried about hyperventilating, right? Just get that oxygen into your body. Step.
I mean, if you manage to hyperventilate in the middle of a sword fight, I would be very impressed.
Exactly. You're burning too much oxygen to be storing it up too much. And again, this is something we always highlight this specifically because we see students who go like, hold their breath while they do the basic cuts, and then when they're done, they're going like, and then they complain like, oh, I'm so tired. And it's like, we've barely done 16 cuts, barely done 2 sets.
Yeah, you also see it in when newbies start sparring, is they launch their attack and they throw a few cuts and they forget to breathe in between, and they just run out of steam in like 2 exchanges. They just, I'm done.
Right? They look at you and they say like, how long have I been fighting? 20 seconds. You've been fighting for 20 seconds. So yeah, breathe with every cut. And try to make this a conscious effort. If you're practicing, if you're at home and you say like, yeah, I want to practice my basic strikes based on what Mr. Sasha taught us. Mr. Sasha, I'm a teacher as well, so based on what this guy on the internet told us, do intentional breathing with every cut. Breathe out intentionally with every cut. If you want to make it a key shout, then I can't stop you. I will ridicule you, but I can't stop you. So, yeah, that's basically it. Breathing. Every cut. So that's 6. I know the 7th. is we got to cut through long and hard. And this is basically what we've already said with distance. You want to extend your sword as far as you can, but we've made it a separate point to highlight it. So if you'll notice, every cut goes through the furthest point that I've done. Right? Every cut here, long and north, and then pull it back down. Cut 2, long and north, furthest extended sword, and then down. Cut 3, long and north, and then down. Long and north, and then back. Long and north, and back. Long and north, and then back. I'll do it sideways as well. I know we have a side screen, but now it's on the main screen. So, cut, long and north, back. Cut, long and north, back. And then 3, long and north, back. Long and north, back. Long and north, back. Long and north, back. Every cut, every thrust goes through long and north. Of course, the thrusts go through long and north because you thrust through long and north. So yeah, every cut goes through long and north. Fine. Do you remember the last one?
I do not. We always forget the last one.
Okay, bonus points for the chat if you remember the last one. We have stepping and stance. We have distance and long and hard. We have, I forgot, breathing and I make this list. I teach this list like.
To be fair, we teach this list once a year.
Yeah, but I've been doing it for like 7 years.
Fair.
You'd imagine that after 7 years I'd remember my own material.
Targets.
Targets, right. Thank you. Who said that? Bonus points
Me.
for that guy. Oh, that's you. Okay, good. Bonus points for you, Farhan. For this one time, all right? Spend them wisely. So, targets. Yes. Very important, right, to remember that you aim at a target. This is hard to do with without a target, but I'm going to try anyway. So the first cut is meant to be aimed at the nape of the neck, like this little corner here, and you'll need to aim there. Sometimes I see people cut like this. They'll cut here, like they cut super high. Like I see Asian short guys standing over me, and they cut over my head. I'm like, I'm tall, but I'm not some sort of giant. Or alternatively, they cut like, yes, I'm cutting, cut one, and they cut like, that's my hip. Right? Aim at the neck, so it can do the most damage. Right? You want to hit the head.
I think the idea of targets and what you're aiming for with cuts we can do in another video. It's a bit of a...
We could do a separate class on that.
Yeah.
Yes, but I just want to say, so cuts 1 and 2 are aimed at the neck. Cuts 3 and 4 are aimed at the armpit. They're not aimed at the knee. They're not aimed at the hip. They're aimed at the armpits. Right? I want to cut upwards, hit the guy in the armpits. Then dog, no. Then cuts 5 and 6 are aimed at the side of the neck, side of the neck, side of the neck. And 7 and 8 are aimed at the chest. Right? And in case you're wondering, you don't aim for the middle of the chest. Right? It's this nice hard sternum there, this nice chunk of bone there that will stop your thrust. I mean, it probably won't stop it, but it will mitigate most of the damage. You want to aim slightly to the side, either to the left or to the right, so that you can slip in between the ribs. Yeah, so those were the 8 things that you have to keep in mind. Review back the stream if you want to know what exactly the 8 different things was. I couldn't tell you. Then, yeah, that's basically it. I wanted to go into the 2 thrusts. We've talked a lot about the cuts. There's a few details that I want to go with thrusts that often go wrong with beginning students. And that's basically that they thrust through the center line, right through the center line, straight through the middle. And not only will this often end up in the very place that I just told you not it shouldn't end up in the sternum, but also a thrust through the middle is the easiest deflected. Because when you thrust through the middle, right, I'm pointing right at the camera now, and you'll notice that if I'm only slightly off to my left or slightly off to my right, my camera's frozen, isn't it? Oh, you just can't see it. Slightly off to my left or slightly off to my right, is I'll miss my target. And that makes them super easily, it makes them fast, and they definitely have the longest reach. If I thrust straight forward, I have the most reach of all the thrusts. And this is 5 centimeters or something, but every 5 centimeters matters, and 5 centimeters is significant. But because it's easily deflected, I recommend against it. What I recommend doing is, from the fluke, I can thrust, my sword starts at the right, and I thrust over the right side. And you'll notice that my sword is from my right side. It's above my extended to the right, and then it's pointing back to the middle. Not only will this generally mean that your target will be slightly off to the side, which means you're more likely to hit the ribs, it's also more difficult to deflect because most deflections aim to keep the sword off that center line, because that's where you are. You are at the center line. So when I come in at an angle, it sort of bypasses that. A little off to the side, and it's a little off the center line. Likewise, from the left, I want to thrust over the left. So that it's the same, but in the reverse. So yeah, that's my reasons for thrusting over the side rather than thrusting straight through the middle. I've had a time during my sword fighting career where I basically swore off on thrusting, just said, okay, just never thrust, because I would never hit anything. It would always be deflected. I thrust to start an engagement, always counting on that my thrust would be deflected. I've learned a few techniques since then, where a few situations where a center thrust might be useful, but generally more useful is the thrust over left or thrust over right. And if you really want to bring this up to next level, your thrust can start on the right side and then you push it to high left. Or your thrust can start on the left side and you can push it through high right. And this will not only, this is actually a separate technique. This is called Absetzen. We'll discuss that in a later video, but basically it's both an attack and a defense at the same time. If somebody is attacking me from the left side, I can cover that side and attack in one smooth move. And if somebody is attacking me from the right, and I can push my sword to the right, cover myself, and attack at the same time. It's called superior attack, and we should talk about that some other time. Right, Farhan.
I mean, we should talk about a lot of things at other times.
There's so much to cover.
Yeah. So let's summarize the basic cuts again, maybe. Oh no. One more thing we want to talk about is generating power for the cuts. So what are you doing with like your arms, your body, your stance?
Right. Maybe it's better if you explain that one, because I'm not really sure where you're going from that.
So one thing you find a lot of newbies coming in with the sword is that they're swinging from the arms. They could put their arms up and they swing with huge, big swings. And that's not how it goes. Longsword and power generation with longsword is surprisingly more like boxing in that the power comes from your hips. So I'm not cutting from the shoulder. And you can see what Sasha is doing. The reason we tell you to step is to turn your hip into the cut, which turns your body into the cut, which gives the cut extra momentum. So even Sasha is, he's not very good at explaining what he's doing. That's because it comes very naturally to how he's doing it. He's stepping in, he's turning his body, and you see if every cut he's sinking slightly into his knees to give to put his body weight into it. And this is how you generate power for your cut. It's not your big berserker swing, like brah, but rather using your entire core mechanic, the core of your body to generate that turn and that cut. Yeah, that's what I want to say with that. The other thing I wanted to mention is you notice that Sasha did a very big cut over his head there, from the shoulders down to the ground. Yes, there you go. This is a demonstration of how you can do the different cuts. It's not necessarily just from the shoulder pushing it out. One thing, one sec. Let me find some space at my desk to demonstrate this. Okay, so sword, arm. Arm has three separate points of rotation. You've got your shoulder, you've got your elbow, and then you've got your wrist. So for most times, throughout this entire demonstration, you're watching Sasha cut from his elbow. He's pushing the sword out, straightening his elbow, and putting out there, putting the sword in front of him. Another way you can cut from there is using your shoulder, which is where you get those big swings. I'm trying not to hit my screen with this. So this here is your elbow and your wrist are kind of immobile, they're locked in position, but your shoulder is rotating with your body to perform the cut. This is generally the strongest cut, but it gives you the least amount of fine tuning, fine movement. Then you've got from your elbow, which is kind of the middle of the arm, you push the elbow out and you do the push-pull kind of cut that we tend to do. It's similar to the stuff they do in Kendo. That's where it comes from, the elbow. This is usually your somewhere in between. You get a strong cut. It's not the strongest cut you can do, but you get a lot of control out of it. It comes very fast. Finally is the cut from the wrist. The cut from the wrist is your least powerful because you're just mainly turning your hands, wiggling your wrists into a kind of thing. We usually use this for quick turnarounds in some techniques where I need to get around your cut. I cut one and then cut around the other side very quickly. So when you're practicing how to do these cuts, you don't want to practice just from shoulder push forward. But if you're starting, you can do that. But you want to start varying it. You can start going up, turning your shoulders in. Then you can come to the same cut from the elbow, and then maybe you can hold your sword out a bit further in front of you and just cut from the wrist. So that's one thing I find is very helpful, that if you can learn and understand how your arm moves the sword and how you cut. It's not so important for the basic cuts, but when you go further in and we teach you all the other cuts, and say the Meisterhauen, the Duplieren, the Durchwechseln, this is very useful in that if you're doing it one way and it's not working, then maybe you should try a different position from your arm moving. I've seen people cut trying to do the abnehmen, the taking away. They cut strong and then they cut the other side and say, "Oh, it's not working. I'm so slow." I'm like, "Well, have you tried using a different part of your arm, making it a smaller cut? So you go in big and then you switch over with a wrist. It makes it very much faster." And we'll get to this small difference in future videos and the future streams. But something to think about when you're holding your sword is like, my arm has 3 points of rotation, and I can use these 3 different points in different ways to achieve different things. Yeah, so back to you, Sasha.
Yes, no, that was fantastic. Yeah, now you explain it that way, that makes total sense. To be fair, I started doing this like 20 years ago, and I never really thought about the body mechanics of it.
20 years ago, nobody thought about body mechanics. You were still trying to figure out what the words meant.
True, fair. So yeah, 17 years ago is pretty precise. There was one more thing I wanted to discuss. How are we for time, Farhan?
I'll keep going. Don't worry about it.
All right. One thing that's important going forward and it just popped into my head, and this will happen more often when I'm doing these classes, but we should talk a little bit about, also I'm tired, so I'm not going to do too much swings anymore, but we should talk about mentality and what sword fighting is and what sword fighting isn't. Because I like practicing sword fighting. I love the historical aspect of sword fighting of HEMA, but I'm also keenly aware this is not a self-defense course. And I think like we should have started with that. Like
Totally should have started with this one.
we should have started with this one like last week. But hey, better late than never. So if you're interested in practicing this, like by all means, man, go right ahead. But don't expect yourself to be reasonably defending yourself in a street fight or something like that. This is not meant for like real life fighting. One, because you're not walking around the street with a stick or a sword that can use that. Two, these techniques are often meant against other people with sticks or swords. Three, us specifically, the Zwaardkring, and we inspect these techniques from usually two perspectives. The historical side, so like, okay, this is the context, the historical context of these techniques, and why is this technique work, and when was it invented. You've heard us talk about, oh, this is an early medieval term, and oh, this is a late sword fighting term, and this was 150 years after the fact. We're very much interested in the historical aspect, and if that's something that interests you, then stick with us. We'll be talking a lot about that. Also, it's from a perspective of tournament fighting, like sparring and stuff like that. Stuff where we have safety gear and stuff where we have proper weapons that we can fight against each other, and with the right mentality that we go into these fights. We'll be looking things from that as well. But from actually learning how to defend yourself, like I want to defend myself on the street, and this sword fighting thing, that's it. Hold on, let me make sure that I say this very clearly. It isn't. It isn't. It's not meant as a sword fighting, as a self-defense style. So with that, I just want to put that big disclaimer out here. It's like, don't go out and get into fights and it's like, yes, I know all the sword fighting, and then now I'm going to be able to rescue myself. No, you're going to get very injured that way. Just to say that. Usually, in this case, what I usually offer is some basic advice for when it comes to street violence, which does come from HEMA, and it brings us to sort of the golden rule, the one rule that we want to adhere to when we talk about sword fighting. The most important rule. Farhan, do you remember the most important rule?
Oh yeah, no.
Hold on.
I live the most important rule.
Do the people in the chat? I know I have some sword fighters in the chat. Do you guys remember the first golden rule? Type it in the chat. You have 10 seconds. 10 seconds to type the golden rule. 9, 8.
No, nobody.
7. Faris. Is Faris still there? I don't know.
Yes, he's there, but he's not
there.
doing anything.
Shame on you.
Yes.
All right.
But
3,
I live
2,
this golden rule.
Right.
It is my mantra.
All right. What is the golden rule?
No, it's don't get hurt.
Don't get hurt. All right. This is the golden rule for any fight, for any situation. You don't get hurt. Whatever we do, our safety should be the number one priority. I always ask people like, hey, you get into a fight. What is your what is your goal? What do you want to accomplish? And I say like, okay, I want to defeat my opponent. I want to kill my opponent. Sometimes I hear that, or something. I want to disable my opponent. I want to. No, none of this matters. The golden rule is you don't get hurt. Right? You must defend yourself first. Now, the way we do this in sword fighting is really interesting, because in sword fighting, the way we don't get hurt is through a concept called the superior attack. And I mentioned that before, the thrust, the sneaky thrust where I start on my right and I twist to my left and I twist like that. I said that was both. I was both defending myself from attacks from the left top, and I was attacking my opponent. And that is a superior attack. A superior attack is an attack where I both attack and defend at the same time. It's the best of both worlds. And then I've been told that this is very German. I don't know, like
Uh,
attacking.
I would like to also add that, especially in sword fighting, it's not so. We always focus on don't get hurt, but another very important rule that a lot of newbies also forget is don't hurt the other guy. We're all here to have fun. We were just not trying to hurt each other. We
Fair, but from a real world perspective, is where we're trying to first and
yes,
foremost
real world perspective. The other
not
guy's
not
not a big deal.
yeah. But the other guy, what it does mean is that the other guy doesn't matter. All right, whatever happens to the other guy doesn't matter. All right,
Uh,
as long as you don't get hurt. So I always put this down in three priorities, right? Say you're getting mugged on the street. Right? You're getting mugged on the street. Somebody walks up to you with a knife or a gun or whatever and says, "Give me your money." And then I say, "Okay, you have the three priorities. One, your first action should be looking for an out, for an escape. Right? If you can run away. You've seen these amazing videos, the ultimate self-defense technique against somebody with a knife. You see this Navy SEAL guy fighting a guy with a knife. And the camera pans to the knife guy, and it pans back, and you see the Navy SEAL guy just booking it. Basically that. Like if you see a way that you can disengage from your target and you can run away, that's probably a good first option. Of course, you need to consider, like, okay, where am I going to run away to? What is a good location? Trust me, police is not a good place to run away to. There's been many studies and many real-world examples where the police stood by and let an assault happen for fear of their own lives. Like they were also adhering to the "don't get hurt" rule. So other people, you can't rely on that, but at the same time, you can get into a situation where it becomes um, less optimal for the other guy to mug you. If you run into a place with lots of witnesses, people tend to reconsider killing someone. Or if you, depends on who you are and where you are, of course. The idea is use your common sense. All right?
okay, so you want to get back to sword fighting because we have a question.
Oh, okay. We have a question.
Uh, Indie Fish Tank asks, where does the term superior attack come from?
Well, okay, good point. So you have regular attacks, which is just, your run-of-the-mill attacks. But the superior attacks means that my attack is superior to your attack. I attack you in a better manner than the other guy. And that's what I mean by an attack that both attacks and defends at the same time. You attack me, but I have a better attack, a superior attack, if you will, where I attack you and I defend against my own attack. So what the Lichtenauer tradition is about, it's about these attacks that both protect yourself from certain attacks and allow you to threaten harm to your enemy. And that forces the enemy into a defensive, because they can attack you, but if I can make a superior attack, a better attack, and I can attack him and defend from his attack at the same time, then I have the advantage. So that is the idea behind the superior attack. My attack is superior to my opponent's attack.
Yeah, if I could add on what we mean by providing a defense as well as an offense at the same time, is that we will probably have to go into this in more in depth into this at another time.
Once
But
we get to some techniques which actually
yes,
apply this.
more about when I attack, I throw a cut. Inferior attack is basically I'm just trying to hit the guy. But a superior attack makes use of two different things in the Lichtenauer tradition. One is that we have a lot of non-linear footwork. We're moving off to the side. We're always trying to get an angle advantage so that my cut always manages to get around your defense. But at the same time, I'm prioritizing moves that close lines of attacks. So, for instance, the Zornhao, when we first use it, cuts straight through. If I do it high, I'm closing off. Oh, sorry, right-handed people. I'm a lefty. If I cut through from my right to my left, I'm closing off my upper left quadrant. That means if the guy tries to attack me from this quadrant, there's nothing he can do. I'm perfectly safe from this side. So if I see that he's holding his sword in the upper left quadrant and I throw this attack, I know I'm safe for him. I'm safe from anything he's going to do. Similar things you can see from the Zwaardkring, which cuts off any attack from above. So if I throw a Zwaardkring, I'm entering with Zwaardkring, I know I'm safe from attacks from above. So if his sword's above me, he's holding it at a high vom tag, I really don't care because I can step in and I'm fine. And that's the idea of superior attack is that I'm attacking you, but I'm also cutting off your line of counterattack. I'm also reducing your options for defending yourself.
All right. I think we're gonna have to cut it here because I just heard that my microphone is dying.
Okay, one more question. When do we stream? We stream Thursdays at 9 p.m.
Yeah, Thursday at 9 p.m. Sorry, I made it last week. I made a mistake with the scheduling. It says that the stream is for tomorrow 9:30, but I'm gonna change that. It's gonna be Thursday 9 p.m. All right. It's our second stream. We're still getting into the hang of things.
Yeah, we are still figuring out this system.
Mm.
Great. If there's nothing else, I think the microphone is dying. So,
Yeah.
Sasha, last word.
Last words. Stay safe. Use your common sense. Don't hit other people. Don't blame us if you do.
Yes, especially don't blame us.
Especially don't blame us. Don't do it, man. If you're from America, good luck. We're in a different country altogether.
Okay.
All right. Let's greet off, and then let's go from there. All right.
We should explain the greeting at some point.
We should explain the greeting. All right. I've got a minute. Okay. So the greeting is where we form a little L with our feet, one foot pointing forwards and one foot pointing directly up to my side. For me, it's my right foot because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you'll need to use your left foot forward. Then, from there, I hold my sword low. I bring my sword up, as long as it's not blocked by any wise. And then I say the magic words, Grüß dich, while making a slight bow. Grüß dich means, it's just German for greetings. Not some special magic words or anything. Just greetings, I greet you. So from here, up, Grüß dich. And then back down again. The interesting part is that the greeting is one of the few traditions that survived. It's described in one or two manuals. And the idea is that you show your opponent the length of your blade. If you were in a lethal scenario, that's an advantage you don't want to give up. So you'd stand up and you point your sword at the eyes of your enemy, and your enemy would have a hard time guessing the length of your blade. But since we're not here to kill each other, since we're here to practice, we show each other the length of our blades. All right, that's about it. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope we will see you guys next week, Thursday, 9 p.m. Like and subscribe. Follow.
The VOD of this will be up for 2 weeks, and this will be up on YouTube by tomorrow, this weekend.
Tomorrow, this weekend, at most, yeah. All right.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ron.
Bye, Sasha.
I'll see you guys next week.